Welcome to another day of Bhagavad Gita Sadhana, in which we examine over the course of 1 year the concept of samatvam, equanimity, of being the same. And ultimately, that means being yourself all the time. I'm Atmadarshan, or Laura, and we do this every day at the same time, and I'm wearing the same clothes, and I've been outdoors in the same spot except for one day. And we're going to use that idea to discuss chapter 14. We've been looking at what's your path in the spiritual life or in daily life. And chapter 14 has the mysterious name, the yoga of the division of the three gunas. And if you don't know what a guna is, you're like, well, that's not helpful. So we will spend the next couple of days discussing what are the gunas. We can break it down a little for Western culture, especially by saying that they're the elemental forces that create everything in this cosmos, three of them. And one might think, well, like in chemistry, there are so many more elements, for example. How can just three things make everything? And then I invite you, if you're sighted, to consider the idea of color. There are three primary colors, and yet they can be combined almost infinitely to make a whole rainbow of perception. Similarly, we have the three gunas. Today we'll start with Tamas, commonly transliterated Tamas, Tamas. And in the Gita and in a lot of yogic traditions, the description of Tamas sounds a bit negative. In fact, it could sound way negative. Let's see what one of the ways Krishna describes Tamas in this book, chapter 14 of the Gita. I'm going to chant it. And I will, if you have the book, I am going to do, if you have this book, Embracing the Song of Your Soul, I'm going to do the right hand translation, which is a little more literal, because it includes the actual name of the guna, Tamas. And basically, the only difference is replacing darkness with Tamas and joy of your people with joy of the Kurus if you have the more poetic version. Okay? So here's a description from Krishna, whose name means darkness, of Tamas. Lack of light and inertness and negligence and delusion are what are produced when tamas is dominant joy of the Kurus. Yeah, that doesn't sound very lovely, does it? Well, let's see. From a human point of view, those things that were described can apply to us when we're in a state of tamas. We can also perhaps get a more concrete example of tamas is like this brick. It's heavy. It's stuck. Like if I put this brick down, it is not going anywhere. And we can look at it when we apply it to ourselves as the feeling of stuckness and of not being able to get anywhere. But actually, what we'll come upon later in this chapter is the idea that whenever we have this tamasic feeling, or whenever it appears around us, we just accept it. That's the way to transcend it and move on. We don't fight with it. In fact, we can acknowledge its good attributes. For example, one could say that I am stuck in this practice because I've selected to do it same time, same place, same clothes, and I'm not going to change it. But on the other hand, I don't have to make all these decisions every morning. What time will I do it? What will I wear? Where will I set up? Blah, 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 blah. Nope. So Tamas can be both a hindrance, like making a decision initially. What will I do? If I'm tamasic, I'm like, I have no idea because I'm deluded about myself and I'm stuck. But once we do have the wisdom to make a good decision and we make it and commit, Tamas keeps us with it. It will keep me going for the whole year. That will be Tamas, even when the other elemental forces are like, don't you want to be at the beach this morning instead? And in fact, bricks and people who you might consider to be tamasic have their place in our world. People who are tamasic might appear stuck, lazy, rude, but in our country, actually, which is a bit of a paradox, in the United States of America, we were actually founded with this idea of hating Tamas. You know, um, people wanted to come and set up a permanent settlement, and they traveled great distances to do so. And the Puritan work ethic, some of the first Europeans who came here, not the Vikings, they were obviously here before us, but they set up this culture with the idea of you have to work to eat. And there were so few people that everybody was expected to contribute, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's still carried over into our society now. We have modern conveniences. Every convenience we get is supposed to free up our time so we can just be and self satisfy at a spiritual level, at a higher level, do what we want to do instead of what we need to do in the daily grind. And yet we have no more time. In fact, many of us feel like we have less time than we did when we could say life is simpler. We have a real love hate relationship with Thomas. In some ways, we crave it. We want to have a day of just lounging around. And then when we have a day of lounging around, we go, I am lazy. I must not lounge around. What can I do to feel better? But we need that. Winter, we need that ability to settle down. That's a great time to embrace Thomas. And if my house is built of brick, we have to embrace the fact that the brick does stay where we put it. Can you imagine if we built a house of brick and then our house would be moving around all the time? Some of the bricks would jump out, some would not. They'd take a walk down the street. They might take part of the house with us, they might not. So Thomas has its good points, its wet points, its dry points. And one thing we need to do is embrace it and also let it go, which we will talk about in the coming days. So today's practice is dedicated to Thomas. When we get to our practice, especially our contemplative meditation, I encourage you to reflect on this idea of being stuck or still or not being able to think clearly and how you relate to that. And maybe you could see it embodied in the world around you, in people who cannot make up their mind in the coffee house line, or the people you observe that every day get the same thing in the coffee house line. How does that make you feel about yourself, especially? Do you judge those same qualities in yourself? Or can you embrace one of the great elemental forces and put it to work for you? I'm going to be hopefully, hello, see? My stool is not Tomasic today. How does that make you feel? Don't you want a little Thomas there? I'm going to try a little Thomas in my balance pose. You're welcome to join. And remember, modify for you. Maybe do it sitting, lying down, or mentally. Switch. time to be Tamasic. Let's sit down and contemplate our relationship to this particular guna, which can be characterized as stability, structure, sloth, darkness, ignorance. Notice how it feels to you to reflect upon these things and how they appear in your life. All right, welcome back. If you're watching live, you might notice there's no link for the video tomorrow because I might be doing the opposite of Tamas, which I may be in a different location. So we shall see about that, and we'll see how that might affect your equilibrium, your samatvam, if I'm in a different place. Tamas is the force of gravity that keeps all our planets in consistent orbits, and may our orbits intersect again tomorrow. Until then.